now. Okay, we're just waiting for people to come through. It looks like we've got quite a lot of people that have just come through. We might get started. Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Caroline McKnight, and I'm here from APRA AMCOS. And welcome to the very first insight session that we're doing in a little series that we're running for our members. I'd just firstly like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from tonight, which are the Wangarabarra people. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Tamborine Mountain in Queensland, and I am very lucky to call this place my home. And I also just would like to say welcome to everybody. We've got people joining us from Australia, as well as our wonderful friends over in New Zealand and possibly elsewhere as well. So we're really happy to have you all here with us tonight. I've got some of my amazing colleagues with me tonight. I've got Nikki Tuckwell, Glenn Benny and Mike Hall. And so tonight, the way we're going to run this is Nikki will be doing the presenting and we'll be talking to you and running through a bit of a presentation for you. And we'll be here in the background sort of helping to answer questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A section, and that's probably the best way that we can get you to ask us questions, and we will do our best to be answering those as we're going along. And then at the end, so this is a 1-hour session, at the end we'll have about 15 minutes time for actual questions as well. So please put in your questions as we're going along and we will answer them in written form as best we can. And at the end, we might leave the curly questions so that Nikki and the rest of us can have a bit of a chat about it. Now, this session we have called Copyright, and it does start with copyright, and it is about copyright and music, of course, but it does also then go into a lot of the basics around being an APRA AMCOS member, registering your works, and everything that you really need to know about that. So I'll leave that for Nikki to explain. But first of all, I just wanted to throw over to Mike in our New Zealand team to say a bit of a hi.
Thanks, Caroline. Kia ora, everybody. Tēnā koutou. I'm talking to you from Tāmaki Makaurau, here in Aotearoa, so Auckland, New Zealand. No kōtirana ne pōneke o ka tipuna, I tipu ake au ki pōneke e noho ana au ki Tāmaki Makaurau. So I'm speaking to you from Tāmaki Makaurau. He kai tito pōroa hau, ko te kai whakahaere mō ngā mema o te tautawhinga. I'm the Manager of Member Operations here at APRA in Aotearoa. Ko Mike Hall tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for all turning up to this, and it's really great to be doing a Trans-Tasman Insights session with everybody. So I'm really grateful to be here and excited about this session and the Q&A as well. It's always really insightful to see where the queries are, where the need is, and what kind of things we need to be focusing on as well in our teams. Kia ora.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to throw over to Nikki now, who, as I said, will be taking you through a bit of a presentation about all things copyright and APRA AMCOS related. So, as I said, get your questions ready, throw them in that Q&A, and we'll have a big chat at the end. Over to you, Nikki.
Thank you so much, Caroline and Mike. I will also begin with a brief acknowledgement of country, just paying my respects to the traditional owners of the land from which I am joining you tonight, and that is to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It's a wet, wild day on Gadigal land, but I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. So excited that so many people have joined us for the very first of these insight sessions. That's enough intro though. Pens at the ready because there's loads to get through. Let's do it. So right at the top, APRA AMCOS, that's who we are. That's who you are members of or friends of. APRA AMCOS is two organisations, and some of you may already know what these acronyms stand for. Some of you might be seeing it for the very first time. So APRA is the Australasian Performing Right Association, and AMCOS, the Australasian Mechanical Copyright Owners Society. So two separate organisations, and this will come into play throughout the rest of the talk tonight, because we look after different areas of copyright. So let me step back for a second. When you are a creator of a musical work, so you're a songwriter, you're a composer, as soon as you start to create musical pieces, you are the owner of the copyright. So here we go, pens at the ready. Copyright. Here in Australia, copyright is free and automatic. We didn't even hold this until the end. This bombshell is coming straight at you right at the top. There is nothing you need to do to qualify or register for copyright protection. So you've written your musical composition, you own it, it's yours. Copyright laws start to come into effect and the protection comes into effect as soon as your works take some tangible form. So that can be written down, it can be your lyrics and your chords, it could be a full score notation, or it could be recordings, and they can be simple recordings that you've made on your phone or on your laptop at home, right through to a fully mastered recording in a studio. This is the sort of thing that you are going to want to hang on to. Keep your demo versions, keep your rough drafts, because if you ever needed to prove ownership of a musical piece, these are the types of evidence and the forms that you would need to bring with you. But we'll come to that in a moment. So registering your works with APRA AMCOS is not to copyright them. It doesn't offer copyright protection. What we do is we help to manage those rights. Now, the Australian Copyright Act and the New Zealand Copyright Act, again, give you, the musical creator, exclusive rights over your music. The protection that is offered here is also offered globally. There's actually nothing more that you need to do. Now, this is because organisations and countries around the world operate under what is known as the Berne Convention. That's how your copyright protects you globally. You would be eligible, if you wanted to register with other organisations. For example, you can register in the USA. There is an office there that you could, if you wanted to, go ahead and register your works for copyright, but you don't need to. I don't want to spend too long on infringement. We'll come to that one as well. But essentially, you've created your work, you've recorded it in some form, you are protected. Additionally, that protection extends for 70 years in Australia or 50 years in New Zealand after you've passed away. So when a composer dies, their beneficiaries or their next of kin are actually able to become like a custodian of their musical work. They're able to give permission for the use of the music and also to receive any royalties and benefits from that music. This 70 or 50 year extension of protection, or the length of protection, applies not only to the composition, but to sound recordings as well. And we're going to come to this. There are different forms of, there's copyright that applies to different forms of how your music is used. So bear with me, there's a lot to get your head around tonight. For more information on the Copyright Act, how you're protected, and the length of copyright, any information like that, in Australia, copyright.org.au, and in New Zealand, copyright.co.nz. These are the experts. These are the people and the resources to use to find out all the details about the intricacies of copyright. Now, as the owner of copyright work, you have certain rights, your copyrights. You can see them listed here. You have the right to reproduce the work, make it public for the first time, make translations, communicate the work to the public, which is essentially transmitting it via wires. That can be internet or music on hold. To arrange or transcribe the work and allow for synchronization. That's a key word. Synchronization is when your music, your composition, is put to film, to a visual or video of some form. So these are the rights that you own. Now, infringement. If you felt and you were able to demonstrate that one of those copyrights that you own has in some way been infringed, there are a number of steps that you can take. The first step is just simply to try contacting the person that you believe has infringed upon your work. Not always an easy thing to do, but we definitely have instances where perhaps the person was unaware that they had made an infringement, or simply where there's been a misunderstanding. This is the best way, a simple form of contact, be it email or phone call. You'd be surprised how often things can be resolved and everybody can come to an agreement as to what is fair. Put the matter behind you and everyone moves on. Now, of course, if you're not able to contact that person, perhaps you don't know them, perhaps it's a completely different songwriter or artist, then get in touch with APRA staff. We may, especially if they're an APRA AMCOS member, we may be able to help facilitate some communication between you and between the other artist to help you come to that resolution. Additionally, if we can see that there is some kind of conflict, perhaps both of you have registered the same work but with different writer shares, and I'm starting to get into some terms that we will definitely come back to. But in those instances, we will, here at APRA, will also be able to place your work into what's called a dispute status. Now, that is going to put the work into a hold status, and it will prevent payments going to anyone. It will remain in that status until the dispute is resolved. So it is really important to reach a resolution. The next step, of course, is to then seek some legal advice. And there are wonderful resources, both in Australia and in New Zealand, to help you get the advice that you need. These resources can be free or very low cost, and they specialize in law for the creative arts. So please do not hesitate to reach out to Arts Law or nzmusic.org.nz. These are the people with legal training that are there to help you, to give you the right advice, and they have the expertise and the knowledge that you need. APRA AMCOS is not able to make a judgment, to give you legal advice, or to resolve a dispute. And that is simply due to the nature of our organisations. We work equally for all our songwriter members, and therefore we can't be seen to take sides. We can't be seen to be ruling in favour of one person or another, or one band or another. We must remain neutral. We are completely a third neutral party in these instances. Now, once you've gone through your steps, perhaps you've tried reaching out directly, you've reached out to APRA, you've gotten your legal advice. If you still cannot come to an agreement, the next thing to do is to try an alternative dispute resolution process. Through APRA AMCOS, you can reach out to resolution pathways, no matter whether you're located in Australia or in New Zealand. Resolution pathways offer a mediation service. They have a third-party mediator who could be just one person that works for their organization. It could be several other songwriters who come on board to help hear the situation, right through to ex-Supreme Court judges. You can choose the level at which you would like to enter into the resolution. And essentially, you will present the case, you will take to them all of your evidence, and this resolution process can go ahead whether the other parties agree to be involved or not. So it is a really great way of taking a dispute and getting a final solution, which of course means we can then remove the dispute status from your work and everybody gets paid. So now that I've told you about what APRA AMCOS doesn't do, can't give legal advice, and we can't solve disputes, what do? Well, again, coming back to the fact that you as a composer, a songwriter, you own your copyright in your musical work. APRA AMCOS is there to help you manage it. What we're doing is essentially acting as a link between you, the music creator, and those who wish to use your music or make it available, the music user. So you might have businesses like local cafes or nightclubs, pubs, huge entertainment venues, or perhaps we're talking about Spotify, we're talking about Netflix, radio stations, television stations. All of these different types of businesses and companies, they are music users. They're making music available for the public to hear it. It would be very, very difficult, I'd say almost impossible, for you individually to try and contact all of these different businesses, find out if your music was being used, try and establish what you think would be a license fee that's appropriate, collect that. It's a huge undertaking. So APRA AMCOS is there to do all this work for you. We already have the infrastructure. We have the license agreements in place. So when you join as an APRA AMCOS member, you're assigning some of your copyright over to us. That means we can then manage those rights for you. We can license, collect a license fee, and pay it back to you as your royalty. We're giving you permission for the music use, and we're paying you the royalty in exchange for that. We're also doing this globally for you, because APRA AMCOS has what are called reciprocal agreements with other organizations, performing right organizations or mechanical right organizations all around the world. So when your music is being played in Japan or England or the USA, they have organizations just like APRA AMCOS that are licensing and collecting in their own territories, taking that money and passing it back to us, which we then pay to you because you're our member. Similarly, we do this for them in return. So when Japanese songwriters or Korean songwriters, German songwriters, when their music is played here in Australasia, we collect the license fees, we take those royalties, excuse me, and we pass it over to the relevant collecting organizations overseas. So what kind of royalties do we collect? Let's get into it. APRA, as the name suggests, the Performing Right Association, we're looking after what is generally known as your public performance rights. So that can include live performances, television and radio broadcasts, which is the broadcast right, and streaming, views on YouTube, views on Facebook. We're talking about Spotify, Apple Music. All of these different streams that are coming through, that's the communication right. So APRA is looking after public performance, broadcast, and communication. We've got you there. AMCOS is a little more specific. AMCOS is just looking after mechanical or reproduction royalties. Now, mechanical royalties or that particular copyright comes into play anytime your composition, so the words and the music, are being reproduced, they're being copied. So that can be a physical copy, like you can see there, CD, vinyl. It can also be print music, sheet music, or it could be a digital copy, like a download. AMCOS looks after all of that. We have also listed there synchronization, because if you're an AMCOS member, we can help you to license synchronization. Now, it's a slightly unusual one. The synchronization right, and I'll just mention again, that is when your words and your music are being put to film or video. That right actually remains with you. You haven't automatically assigned it to AMCOS as a member, but if you are approached by someone who wants to use your music in their film or their TV show, we can help you to negotiate that license. You just need to reach out to us. Now, I did say I would come back to this, and I'm remaining true to my word. There are multiple types of copyright, as we've talked about, but there are also different forms in which your music is used, and each form has its own copyright protection. So I've mentioned the composition, by which I'm talking about the words and the music. APRA AMCOS has songwriter and composer members. We look after specifically the copyright pertaining to the musical work, and I'm including in that lyrics. Now, lyrics by themselves are what is known as a literary work. So if you only write lyrics and there's no musical component to that, it actually falls into a different area, which is administered by the Copyright Agency in Australia. So it's not APRA AMCOS. But once you've got music behind it, it becomes a musical work. So for our purposes, we're talking about words and music. Separately to that, most times you've written your words and music, it then gets recorded. So you've got your sound recording, also known as a master. This is protected, the sound recording is protected by its own set of copyright. APRA AMCOS does not manage the copyright in a sound recording. The public performance of the sound recording is the PPCA here in Australia, or managed by Recorded Music NZ in New Zealand. The reproduction of the sound recording is most often managed by a record label, but you might also find that you're being paid by your online distributor for reproductions of the sound recording. So they are distinct, they are different, and they're handled by different organisations. They may also have different owners. I'll try and make that a little clearer. So, for example, if Mike, who was speaking to us earlier, if he writes a song and he thinks it's fantastic, he's like, this is definitely top 5 with a bullet, loves it, but feels like perhaps he doesn't have the best vocal range for the song. But he thinks perhaps Caroline, who also spoke to us earlier, Caroline's actually the person to make this song hit. So he's written the song, he gives it to Caroline, and Caroline records it at home on her own equipment. She then releases her recording. We have 2 separate things going on. Mike is going to receive APRA AMCOS royalties because he wrote the song. But Caroline owns the recording, so she would receive any royalties whenever the recording is being performed or copied. Now I'm going to take it back again to APRA AMCOS because that's why we're here tonight. That's what we're talking about. Quite often, Mike is not writing by himself. He has co-writers, and many of you probably do as well. So when you're working with a co-writer, there are lots of things to consider. But most importantly, consider how you're going to split those royalties. Who owns this song? Now, it can be a really tricky conversation to have, but it's so important. So if you feel a little awkward having that conversation before, you even sit down to start writing, then maybe the time to do it is at the end when the song is finished, everything feels great, everyone's on a high, cracking open beers or popping champagne if that's more your style. Right then and there, talk to everyone. How are we splitting the royalties on this? Are we going to go even splits across the board? Are we going to do, percentages depending on who contributed a certain amount? The thing with splits on a song is that there is no right or wrong. And I know people love to hear that there's a formula. You hear some very common ways of doing it. Some bands go automatic even splits across the board, no matter what. There's the Nashville rule, where everyone who was in the room, even if they didn't contribute, gets a split. Now, it's one way of doing it. No matter what you decide upon, the most important thing is get it in writing. Cannot stress to you how many times this will end up avoiding heartache down the line. Even an email to which everybody has replied, or a text message to which everyone has replied and said, yes, those are the splits we agreed on and I'm into, can save you so much trouble. Of course, a formal contract is fantastic, but whatever you can get is better than nothing. The next thing to consider is who actually should be included on an APRA AMCOS registration. So because APRA AMCOS is only paying songwriters, the people who actually created the musical composition, not everybody necessarily gets a cut of the royalties. We generally are looking at composers, lyricists, and beat makers when it comes to an APRA AMCOS registration. It is quite common these days for a producer to be creating a beat, and therefore you quite often will include them on an APRA AMCOS registration. But if a producer was really just there in the studio, putting their style or, making suggestions, then maybe they didn't contribute to the actual composition. And so they might not be receiving a cut from the APRA AMCOS royalties. It's really important that you know whoever you register on a work is there permanently unless they agree in writing to have their shares changed. And so you can change shares. If you perhaps write the song and there are 4 bandmates and then a 5th person comes in and they start to contribute, maybe they add an extra verse or a bridge and you want to give them a percentage, we can absolutely do this. But we do need all of the original composers to agree in writing, and then we'll go ahead and make the changes. The other thing to know when you're registering the works is that whoever has been registered has control of that work and how it's used. So while the Nashville rule, where everybody in the room gets a share, might seem like a really lovely thing to do, or you might want to give your best friend 2% because they suggested that you should write the song in the first place. The thing to know is that in future, if you ever get offers for that song to be used in theatre or advertising, they're able to say yes or no. They have 2%, and that 2% can be the difference between you going ahead with future use or not. So it is really important to credit the correct people on the APRA AMCOS registration. Now, we have talked about the fact that the APRA AMCOS registration and the actual composition is different to the sound recording. So you might have people who are asking for points, and generally they are talking about a share in the recording. There are people who may be entitled to a share in the actual master as opposed to the composition. And you can see here, engineers, producers, session musicians, these are the sorts of people that might be receiving royalties from the master. Now, it's important to note that you don't have to give these people a share, or just like your percentages for the APRA AMCOS registration, this can be negotiated as well. It's perfectly normal, very, very common to simply draw up a contract that states, I am paying you a one-time fee as my vocalist or as my producer. When I come into the studio today, I'm paying you this amount, and that will be all that you're receiving. There will be no ongoing royalties. Again, though, the crucial thing is to get it in writing. Whatever is agreed, make sure everybody's happy with it, put it in writing, and you're done. So once you've done all that, you've got your agreements, you've sorted it out, the time has come to register the work with APRA AMCOS. And for that, you go to your writer portal. So once you're an APRA AMCOS member, you have access to the writer portal online. From here, you're logging in using your email address and password. You can get all kinds of awesome information. The all-important royalty information is there. And of course, you can keep us up to date on any of your personal information and your bank account, because we need to be able to pay you. But most importantly, you're looking for the Works tab. And that's because this is where you're going to register your compositions with us. Once you're on the Works tab, you have several different options here for you. You can view all of the songs that you've already registered with us. You can search, you can filter via your co-writers or title, all this kind of thing. You'll also find that there is an area here for unregistered works. Now, an unregistered work, if you see one in your account, is where we have received reporting that basically indicates there's a song that you've written that's being played. Maybe it's been performed on radio, or maybe it's streaming online. While we have the records to indicate the song is yours, you still have to claim it as the copyright owner. We can't go ahead and just make that assumption. So if there's an unregistered work there, you're going to fill in a new work registration, which is exactly the same as if you had just brand new written the song and we're registering it right away. So let's go through how we do that. The first thing you're going to do when you click register new work is select the type of work. You've got three options: regular, jingle, and arrangement. Regular work is pretty much everything. If you've written a new song, it's yours, it's original, this is what you're going with. I don't have a specific number, but 95% of songs that are registered with us are regular works. The next one you can choose is a jingle. This is specifically for work that is already being used in an advertisement or that you've been commissioned to write for an ad. That's when you're going to register a jingle. The jingle registration is the only one to which you can add audio. And that's because this is a jingle is the only type of song that audio is used for matching purposes. It's also required if your jingle is being played in metropolitan areas. We do need that audio. And the third and final type that you'll find you can enter is an arrangement. Now, arrangement is very specific. It only applies where you've taken another composer's work and you've added original compositional elements to it. So we're talking about elements such as harmony, instrumentation, and structure. So we're not talking about you've taken somebody's work and performed it in a jazz style, or you've changed the key. These would be covers of somebody's work. you don't register covers. Because APRA AMCOS pays songwriters, that song is already registered. We're going to pay the original songwriter. An arrangement is different. Now, if a work is out of copyright, which means, thinking back to our earlier slides, it means the composer died either 70 years for Australia or 50 years for New Zealand earlier. If it's out of copyright or in the public domain is another term, you can go ahead and register your arrangement without any further permission. You're going to add the original composer of an out of copyright work, but you're going to give them 0% of that arrangement. Basically, there's no royalty due to them because the work is out of copyright, but it lets us know who the original composer was and that you are the arranger of the new work. Now, very differently to that, if you're making an arrangement of a work that's in copyright, it's not in the public domain yet, you must have permission from the copyright owner. That's most often the publisher, but it can sometimes be the songwriter themselves. You must have their permission and you must have it in writing. So be aware, if you enter arrangement, these all get looked at one by one, and you quite likely will be contacted. We will request a copy of your written permission because that is going to give the exact percentage splits that need to be allocated to you as the arranger and also to the original composer. So once you've decided to register your regular work, jingle or arrangement, we're going to look at a regular work here, then you're going to give us some more information. The number one thing we need is the title. The title is mandatory. We must have that. You can also add any alternative titles. So if your song, as you can see here, is called Dungeons and Dragons, but we also popularly know it as the role play rap, you can pop that in there. You can add a performer name. So we obviously have your account in your legal name. You are the copyright owner, so your APRA AMCOS membership will be in your full legal name. But we all know that many, many songwriters operate under pseudonyms all the time, every day. And this is where you would put in your stage name. So we can more easily identify the work when it's performed under the stage name and match it back to you. You can add the duration. However, you don't have to, but it's there. It's another piece of information that helps us match performances of your work back to you. You need to put that duration in a 0000 format. So we need at least 4 numbers there. And last, but certainly not least, the ISRC code. Now, again, an ISRC code is not mandatory. You can add it later. You don't have to add it at all. And we do have lots and lots of members who write songs that they never record. Maybe they only ever play them live. And that's why an ISRC is not mandatory. You can also add multiple ISRCs, but let's go into that in more detail. What is an ISRC? So the breakdown, International Standard Recording Code. Now therein lies the key. An ISRC identifies a recording of a song. That's why it's not mandatory on an APRA AMCOS registration. You are going to have multiple ISRCs attached to one APRA registration. And that's because you've written a song, but you're probably going to have different versions of that song released. You might have the album version. You might have a radio edit. You might have a dance version. You might have an acoustic version. And then on top of that, more than likely, you're going to have a Spotify version, a Facebook version, a YouTube version. Each of those may have its own ISRC identifier. So because we only need one registration, you're going to add all of the different ISRCs to the one registration with us. That way, every time, every different recorded version of the song is performed, they're all going to match back to the single existing registration and you will be paid. The ISRC is usually embedded into the master, but if you're releasing digitally, your aggregator or your digital distributor, they can also embed that information for you before they push it through to the streaming platforms. Oh, did that flick on? It didn't look like it moved on. Let's try again. There we go. So where do you
Nikki,
get? Yes.
Can I just, sorry, I'm just interrupting you and giving you a time frame. We're at 6:13.
We're getting
So
there. Okay.
We're getting there.
Alrighty. So where do you get your ISRC? Here is your information. Just to reiterate, APRA AMCOS doesn't require an ISRC because we're dealing with the song itself and not the recording. So here in Australia, you can go to ARIA. In New Zealand, it is Recorded Music NZ. All the contact details are there, but we're also going to pop them in the chat for you. So please don't think you need to be furiously writing this down, although you can, or screenshot it, whichever works best. A little more information on ISRCs. This is a breakdown of an ISRC code. You can see here, they usually identify the country in which the ISRC was generated. They give you an indication of the year of release, and then there's a 5-digit designation there at the end. Just wanted to make a quick point about the fact that you don't need to panic if you click on one of your work registrations and find that it has had ISRCs automatically added to it. As I mentioned, the different online platforms quite often deliver this information to us because your digital aggregator has provided it to them. So as long as it's the correct ISRC, you're all good. No need to panic. Coming back to our work registration. So you've told us it's a regular work, you've told us the title, the performer, the duration, and maybe you've added an ISRC. The next thing we need to know is crucial information. You have to fill this in. Who wrote it? Now, by default, you're in your own writer portal. So it's going to assume that you are the first contributor. You can see here in the top left-hand corner that the first thing that comes up is you, your writer name, and 100% of the shares to you. You then have the option to change this. You can add a new co-writer, or if you've registered a song with the same co-writer previously, you can actually search for their name and really easily add them again. If you're adding a new co-writer, that top right-hand square, that's what you would see there. So we're asking for the full name of your co-writer. Their first name and their last name is great, but if you have their middle name, that's even better. Next up is their IPI number. An IPI number identifies a songwriter as a unique individual copyright owner. And copyright collecting societies all around the world use the IPI number to identify you and all writers individually. If you've got the IPI number for your co-writers, please add it in. It really does help. And lastly, at the bottom, you'll see you can add their title, so their role within the song. Were they a composer and author, as in music and lyrics, or did they just write music? Did they just write lyrics? You can add that information. Next up, if you've decided to add a co-writer, you're going to be asked about the split. So coming down to the bottom left side of the slide, you'll see there you have the opportunity to choose an even split, and the system will do this automatically for you, or you can choose to add in a manual split. You can make that manual split whatever you want. You can see here in this example that writer number 1 is going to get 44%, writer number 2 is going to get 56%. The crucial thing is, of course, we have to have 100% in the end. If you don't get 100%, you're going to get that error message. And it's going to tell you, you don't have 100%. Now, that example I just showed was, of course, our writer portal online. But to make things even easier, you may be aware, but you may not, we have a phone app. Super, super sweet, easy to use. Just download APRA AMCOS for music creators, and you will be able to do all of this anytime, wherever you have your mobile phone. So, of course, you can log in as usual, but the app allows for fingerprint technology, so you can log in using your fingerprint. Pretty standard with apps these days, but nonetheless, it's a nice feature. The beauty of the app is it allows for immediacy. So if you've just played a live gig, you can enter your live performance reports right away. You also have access to a digital member card. So if you ever need to prove your APRA AMCOS membership, that's right there for you. But most importantly to us right now, you can register your songs. So when you've had that discussion, everyone's sitting in the room drinking and having a great time, or whatever you're doing, ordering pizza, go into the app and immediately enter the work registration. This is what it looks like on the app. Again, we must have the work title. You can add an alternative title if you have one. You can add the performer. It's really all of the same information. The way you set the duration is a little bit different. And there on the right, I've just done a little screen grab to show how you would add any co-writers. Next up, when you go to add those co-writers, this is how it looks on the app. So again, just super, super simple to use. You again have the ability to search pre-existing co-writers writers you've written with before, or add any new ones, choose their role as composer and author, enter their IP. It's all there. It's the same process, just a little different on the app. Now, when you've registered the work, it is immediately available to you. So if you need to add it to a live performance report or a live stream performance report, you can. As soon as you've registered the work, we have the information and we're able to collect royalties. So these are really key things to know. You will be assigned either a GW code, which is an APRA work ID. It just allows us to identify the specific work. GW for general works, JG for jingles, and AR for arrangements. These are all APRA only identifiers, but we can find your work using the title or one of these identifiers. It's pretty straightforward. Once your work has been registered, it also then goes to our works registration team. They actually manually process all the work registrations that come into us. So although your work is there immediately, and for all intents and purposes, it's active, there is a little bit more checking that goes on. And once our works team get to it, which can take a little bit of time, as you can imagine, it's a manual process, they will fully process a song, at which point you could be issued an ISRC. Now, this is a code that's used by collecting societies all around the world. So just like you have your own code that identifies you as a writer, this identifies your song, and it's used internationally. A couple of things to know about an ISRC. It identifies the song itself, the composition, not the recording. That's what makes it different to the ISRC. And the other thing to know is that in order for this code to be obtained, all of the co-writers, if you have them, have to be members of a performing rights organisation. So what that means is that there has to be an organisation administering the performing right. If there's nowhere for the royalties to be paid out, then we're not able to finalise that. So make sure all of your co-writers are members. And lastly here, I've got a couple of screenshots to show you the catalogue search, because when your works are registered, you'll be able to look them up on the APRA AMCOS website. You type in the title, performer name, or the writer names, and this goes for not only your own songs, but songs in general. When you type in that information, as you can see here in the example, you will get a result showing who wrote the song, the APRA identifier, the international identifier, and possibly more importantly, the publishers. So I mentioned earlier, for arrangements, you need permission from the copyright owner if the work is in copyright. This is where you would find out who to contact. So for this particular song formerly known as, the publisher is Warner Chappell. That's who you would need to go to if you were going to make an arrangement of this song. Now, I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to leave it there with our contact details. Of course, contact APRA AMCOS anytime with queries about work registrations, anything that we can help with that relates to your membership. We'd be more than happy to help with. If you've got legal queries, arts law, arts in Z, go to the Copyright Council. All of these resources are there to help you. Again, we're going to pop those links into the chat. And that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it. It looks like the Q&A is going crazy. The chat is going crazy. So let's open up the floor.
Thank you, Nikki. That was amazing. We've got some questions, so we've been furiously trying to answer questions, but some of them I feel like have been answered along the way. There's a couple left hanging around. There's one in particular where Anthony has asked us about the royalties. So he said that he's joined up through a music aggregator, DistroKid, collecting royalties for his songs. He said, how do the royalties collected from DistroKid differ from the royalties collected by APRA AMCOS? Can you please explain that?
Yes, I can. It goes back to where we were talking about the different copyrights for different areas. So we're looking after your compositional copyright for the actual words and music, but you've got that sound recording and there's copyright there as well. If you've uploaded your works through a digital aggregator, they are most likely paying you royalties for the use and the reproduction of that sound recording. So that's most likely where you're receiving a payment from them that differs from any payments you'd be receiving from APRA AMCOS.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, some other questions that we've got. There's a question about if someone creates the music backing to somebody else's melody and lyrics, is that providing the music bed that was mentioned before, and how is this represented in registering a song?
No, so I think what you're describing there is you've actually written the melody, like maybe you've notated it, maybe you've sung it, but someone has just played it so that you have an actual recording. That is not them writing your song. They haven't contributed to the composition. All they've done is created a recording, a track for you to then perform on, if I've understood the question correctly. So when I was referring to a musical bed being part of the composition, I was literally talking about quite often a music producer these days or a beat maker will create tracks, usually using software, digital platforms, and they're creating all new music. They're doing it digitally. That is the musical bed. So they've come up with the melody themselves. They've created that musical track. That is when they would be entitled to a share of the APRA AMCOS royalties because they composed that melody. But if you've composed the melody and someone just played it, then no, they wouldn't be cut in on APRA royalties.
We have a question from Imogen, who has joined up and is 16 years old, so her parents have registered on her behalf. So hi, Imogen, awesome. But unfortunately, her co-writers have not been added into the song registration. So we would just suggest you can absolutely update that. You just need to contact us. So I would suggest sending us an email. That email, depending on where you are, actually, at that contact page at the end, which we'll put in the chat, there will be an AU email address and an NZ email address. Just send it through to us and someone will help you out with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What else have we got? If I have a collaboration with a US songwriter and you both have shares in the master, do I request an ISRC from ARIA or does he request one in the US?
Honestly, either of you can do this, because the important thing is that that ISRC is attached to your registrations. So you can have a US code on your registration with us. So many people do, particularly if they're using a digital distributor who is located overseas. So that's no problem at all. It's really up to you. I guess whoever can get the best deal. And usually an ISRC is free. So you shouldn't need to have to pay for it, but I don't know for certain in the States, there may be fees associated. So in that case, it would make sense for you to perhaps get one. But as long as you both have the matching codes on your registrations, you are all good.
Okay, so we have another question, which is about, Fiona said, I'm still not clear on whether APRA recommends I have an international co-writer register for copyright with their copyright office in addition to their PRO. Since copyright is in Australia, and since copyright in Australia is automatic and free, is that not the case in the US, for example? Now, I will just say, Nikki, that what we've been typing away here has been, I've been saying to people that if they are writing with people who are members of other societies, I would always recommend that you each register your works with those particular societies. But I think also what Fiona is talking about is the actual copyright itself.
Yes, I understand what Fiona is saying. Look, I think, again, I am not certain whether there would be a fee associated with registering like that in the US. I would suggest it certainly can't hurt. Of course it can help. It definitely help. The work is protected, definitely. But as an Australian whose work is available overseas, you are actually eligible yourself to register with the US body. So in this particular case, knowing that the work quite obviously could be played over there, your co-writer might be playing it, or simply because they know people over there, it could be getting some play, some traction over there. I would recommend covering all bases in this particular instance.
Now, please jump in, Mike and Glenn, if you've got anything to add here. I'm just throwing things at Nikki right now.
I just had, sorry, Caroline, one question from Joe about podcasts. Nikki, you might be able to help me with this. And I know there aren't currently royalties coming from podcasts on Apple Music and Spotify. Is there a time when podcasts do pay royalties? And also, do people need permission to use your works in a podcast?
Oh,
do any of you on the panel know the answer to that? Because I couldn't answer that. I'm sorry, Joe.
So the good news about this is podcast is actually specifically going to be covered in an upcoming insight session. So if you have signed up for the My Music is Streaming online, which is in 2 weeks' time, we are going to cover this. Very briefly, there can be royalties from podcasts. We license it here in Australia. You do need permission, essentially. Where things can get a little tricky is that not all performing rights organisations in other countries license podcast use. So we can't always collect a royalty for you outside of Australia. That's where it gets tricky. So there is a royalty and we can get it, but not from everywhere. I think I've forgotten the rest of the question. there are ways that you can do this. You can use what's called an unlogged claim if there are significant streams of the podcast, like really significant. Do people need permission? I mean, yes, they do. They're making your music publicly available. So I would suggest if a podcast is using your work and they hadn't contacted you about it, I'd reach out to them and I would be as positive as possible and be so excited that they're using your music, because that is actually really cool. You can direct license that with them. We are going to go into this in more detail. It's quite involved. So come back in 2 weeks or shoot us an email in the meantime and we can give you more information about that too.
Can I just say one thing too? I've had a few people messaging saying that they had a cancelled Zoom session for one of the upcoming insights. And I think what happened was there was a double booking for a Zoom session. So one of them was cancelled. So I think I may have rectified the issue, but if people have received a cancelled Zoom session for an insight session they registered coming up, please let me know. So I will come back, send us an email because it's not cancelled. It's going ahead. You just need to have an updated Zoom session. Now, we have quite a lot of questions and I'm very aware that we've actually run out of time. So I'm not sure how we should tackle this exactly. Some of the questions have been, a few people have been asking about whether you can change registrations on works. You can change registrations on works. You just need to have written permission from absolutely everybody involved. So all the co-writers, they need to contact us directly. We need an email, written confirmation to say that you want those registrations changed and what the changes are, and we can fix it on your behalf. What else have we got?
Just in the chat, there's a thing about the national anthem, and you cannot register an arrangement of the national anthem because the federal government own the rights to that,
right?
Even though it is out of copyright according to copyright laws.
Wow.
I also saw a query about New Zealand copyright law compared to Australian copyright law. Generally very similar. If there's anything specific, I think it was from TJ Zimba, if there's anything specific you'd like to query, please just email us, nz@apra.co.nz, and we can look into it. But generally speaking, very, very similar.
What else can we knock off quickly? And I think, can I just say too that, and it's difficult doing these because once we run out of time, and I know everyone has lots of questions, which is amazing, please feel free to email us and we will happily sit here and spend the time and answer your question directly. So if we don't get to your question, apologies, please contact us directly and we'll look into it. I think if anybody else wants to add anything in, Nikki, or if you want to answer anything specifically, let me know, but we might have to let everyone go otherwise, I think.
Oh, no, look, I feel like it seems to me that I would be trying to pick through questions that you guys have been across while I have been blind to them and trying to present. So this has been great. I hope that we have enlightened you more than created more questions. But as always, as Caroline has said, please reach out if we can answer more questions. And apologies, I was watching the time on the presentation, but of course, I didn't start at exactly 5:30. So I was like, I'm doing great, 45 minutes, I'm nailing this. And
I'm going to send out a survey to anybody who's attended. So feel free to get back in touch with us. And I think too, please just email us and we can answer your question directly. But we'll do our best to put some information together and send it out to all attendees as well. A few people have asked us about whether we have recorded this session, and we will be recording the session. So if you do get in contact with us, if you specifically want a copy of it, and I'll see if we can actually do that for you.
And
on that note,
close it up, Caroline. I'll just keep talking.
Thanks, Nikki. It was brilliant. Thank you.
No, thank you,
everybody
everyone.
for coming along.
Thank you, everybody, for coming along. Much appreciated.
Have a great night.
Thanks, guys. Bye.